Hey gang, we're in here. Welcome on back to the Cade and another episode of Sucker Punch Sunday, the series where we do a deep dive into a classic fighting or fighting platform-based game from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation. And for this week, we're going to go back to 1994, 30 years ago, which makes me feel just a little old. But anyway, and we are going to take on a game that I have no recollection of this game ever coming out. But it was released not only on the Super Nintendo, which is the version we're playing today, but also on the Sega Genesis and the Sega CD and the Amiga and the 32X for the Sega Genesis and for MS-DOS. We're going to play brutal Paws of Fury. Now, as you can see, this is a 2D fighting game, very much in the vein of the popular fighting games at the time, which means somebody, in this case, GameTek and Eurocom, were scrambling like mad to pick up whatever crumbs they could get off the floor left by Street Fighter II, Mortal Kombat, and such. And of the games that we've played that come across on multiple systems, this may be the first example that I have found of one that is definitively better on one console than the other. And I'll get into that in a second. So we'll just start with a new character. And we will, well, we gotta enter our name. So let's put my name in. No. There's an O between R and N. I know I'm old, but I still remember how to spell my name, darn it. And now we get to choose from one of 9 different characters, and they are all obviously anthropomorphic animals who have different martial arts abilities. So we start with Kung Fu Bunny, and then we have Prince Leon of Kenya. We've got Tai the Cheetah, Ray the Rat, Kendo Coyote, Foxy Roxy, which I don't know if that's a character that would necessarily fly nowadays, Ivan the Bear. And then there are 2 other characters, Karate Croc and Dalai Lama, who you can access by means of inputting a secret button sequence or unlocking them later on in the game. For this one, we're going to play as Kendo Coyote. And as you see, we start out, we have a white belt, and we've got a win, loss, and draw record, which is unique to this kind of game because it wasn't something that was really tracked in most fighting games. Street Fighter II didn't have this sort of system in it where you would know how many fights like Sagat had, or how many fights E Honda had, or how many fights Ryu had. You just went in and you fought. Which to me in some ways is a cool little metric to the game. Only because I'm the sort of person who grew up, you know, around sports junkies, so, and watching boxing and MMA and wrestling, always knowing what the record of a fighter was interesting to me because that's how you separate the really good fighters from the tomato cans. So as you see here, you're now white belt, and this game has a password system. I'm not going to worry about that right now. And then special moves that are learned. So as you go through this game, you can learn special moves, obviously, and you can adapt them to your character. And as you see this map, we will be fighting all over the place on this map, starting with the landing, which is this beachhead down in the southwest corner. Now, here is where, and I'm going to pause this really quick if I can. As you see, I like the way the graphic presentation is. The characters are up front. They're well represented. I like the cartoonish aspect of it. The color I really dig for a 16-bit game. This is the sort of stuff that I'm more used to seeing on an SNK Neo-Geo 24-bit game and onward from there. But here's why I want to make sure, and I want to make sure you understand why we're playing the Super Nintendo version of this rather than the Genesis version of this. The control layout is the same. You have punches and kicks, you move with the D-pad and all that stuff. But on the Super Nintendo version, because you have the X, Y, and A and B button and the shoulder buttons, the moves are already programmed in for punches and kicks. So if I hit the X button, that'll be a punch, Y will be a punch, A will be a kick, B will be a kick, shoulder button, punch, kick, same thing. On the Genesis, and this is exclusive to the Genesis, if you have the standard controller, you only have 3 buttons available, A, B, and C. So when you start out, if you hit the A, B, and C button, you will be able to do one or the other. You'll be able to throw a punch or you'll be able to throw a kick. You can't do both. In order to switch between the two movesets, you have to hit the start button on your Genesis controller to swap them over, which is really annoying in a fight when somebody's trying to hit you in the face and knock you out. So, if you're thinking about it in terms of difficulty and you want to try this game, I would highly recommend that you start with the Super Nintendo version because, again, moves all laid out. You don't have to do that start button swap. It's a lot easier to get into it and figure it out. When I play tested these games to make sure that they worked so I could record this, that was the first thing I found was that the Genesis version, you had to go back and forth between the start button for punches and kicks, which, again, really annoying. So, with that little PSA, not PDA, out of the way, let's get on with this fight, shall we? So as you see, you got your ability to do punches, and you can do kicks. And one of the things that I noticed really fast about this game is that it's really easy to stack moves. And if you're familiar with other fighting games like Street Fighter, you will find similarities between classic characters in that game and other games and characters here. It's nothing new. It's not like GameTek came about and was really determined to reinvent the wheel. Now, if you want to, you can watch the instant replay of me getting my butt kicked, or we can skip it and go to fight number 2. Now, it's still best 2 out of 3 falls wins the fight. And as you can see, while it's a fighting game, the contact is not super severe, and now I've been stunned. And I've been knocked out. So, with Tai Cheetah here, who is actually the mentor of Kendo Coyote, he is very, very fast and can pull off moves very, very quickly that do a lot of damage. Now you can look and see what your overall stats were. So I threw 31 punches, threw 28 kicks, and got whipped both times. And in this game, you only get 3 continues. So now if I want to, I can rotate around and I can pick somebody else. So I think for this one, I will try Kung Fu Bunny this time. Because why not? He's a rabbit monk. And we have to fight Tai Cheetah now. Still haven't learned any special moves yet. We're still on the beachhead. So in order to beat this game, you gotta go through and do it with less than 3 continues. And as there are 10 other fighters on this island, the odds of you having the means to do so are not really all that great. And as you see, I'm not doing as much damage to him as he's doing to me. And I've been knocked as my toes are sticking out from just behind the dude. And part of why I'm not doing as much damage is because the heavy attacks are programmed into the shoulder buttons on the Super NES controller. So you gotta get used to tapping those if you really want to do more damage. And I stunned him and I put him down. Now, in the reviews of this game, the Super Nintendo version is considered the best rated. EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, gave it a 6.5 out of 10. They praised the music and the cinematics as stunning, and said that of the variations of it, the Sega CD version was obviously the best. But again, if you're going to play it on the Sega CD, you're going to run into that same problem. Now, there is a way that you can get a 6-button... Ooh, I got stunned right there. That time I knocked him out. But in regards to the Super NES version, EGM, they praise the idea of learning special moves throughout the game. And it comes with a caveat that according to the reviewers of the time, that mechanic ultimately makes this game less interesting than more interesting because it makes all the other controls fairly weak. But GamePro, in their review, said that the Super NES version has greatly improved controls, as I have already stated, over the Genesis and Sega CD and 32X versions, while the Sega CD version made it look graphically better. So now we're going to take on Ray the Rat. We're going to fight him on a bridge. And you may notice that it's automatically baked in that we don't have a timer for how long this fight's going to go. But we put Ray down. When Next Generation did their review of the PC version of the game, they said it was a solid fighting game that should please any fan of the genre, and you don't need to see blood and gore to be entertained. And I agree with that. This is the sort of game that doesn't really call for that. It is very much more cartoonish in its presentation, and I agree with him in that not all games have to have a high degree of blood and or gore to be effective as a fighting game, as a platformer, as whatever. And that's not to say that I don't like games that have that built into it. I mean, some of my favorite games I've played in the last decade are games like Skyrim, which you can mod in if you want to up the combat and make it really gross, you can do that. I love Ghost of Tsushima, and the standoffs in that game, you can decapitate people. I mean, you can slice people to shribbins, as a Scottish friend of mine used to say. So now it looks like we get to learn a special move. And I don't think I'm going to be able to pull this off, only because I didn't necessarily see the code sequence that they put in on it. But it looked like a taunt more than anything. There we go. Brutal. Also, as you see, I have my keys mapped out a little bit differently on my controller. So now we have to take on Ivan the Bear, who I can only assume is Russian. So we've learned the taunt, which means he is going to be a master of Russian wrestling. So think Zangief. So he's going to be, well, he's not necessarily slow, but by comparison to me, he is. Oh, my God, he just completely bulldozed me. But I stunned him, and it looks like if you can stun him well enough and then hit him, that takes out a considerable amount of his life. He's sticking his chin out, want me to hit him. I'll be only too inclined to do so. Oh, except he slammed the ground and that took me out. So something that you can do, you can almost get a free hit off. Right when it says fight. There isn't no real Marquis of Queensberry rules in here. But we took Ivan the Bear down, and now we're kind of cooking along here. So once you really get the mechanics down, so we're 3-0, we're 6-4 overall in head-to-head. But like any other fighting game, once you get the core mechanics down and you understand how to move, the best time to strike, okay, he pulls out the guitar. That was not exactly sporting. And that knocked me out. So he goes Pete Townsend with the guitar. And you can block, but blocking is only so helpful in this game, like it is in most fighting games. And you just have to hold back. Unfortunately, he can't knock me out of the ring. But him doing that power chord is not helping me much. But I come back with a boot to the head and down he goes. So we passed Prince Leon of Kenya. And now we get to watch another special move. So down and... whoop. So we have to do the sweep. So now we can do this back leg sweep to take out an opponent, which can be really helpful. Leg sweeps are so underrated in games because you figure you got an opponent coming at you, and especially if they seem to have the advantage, you do a quick leg sweep, you knock them down. Ah, so we double tap it, and that's how we do that. We do the leg sweep and then the flash kick, or with the roundhouse kick. So now we get to fight Kendo Coyote. So here's the high flash kick. So let's see if we can't pull this one off. And like most games, you don't want to get too reliant on standard moves or on special moves either. As we put down old Kendo Coyote here. But that he does that Blanca ball and kind of spins around everywhere. And he is a lot faster than you would think for somebody his size. But we take him out. Now we can see who's next. We can face Foxy Roxy, who is described in the rundown as a, quote, lycra-wearing vixen who is a politician and social activist. Now, being a vixen means there is an actual animal called a vixen. If I remember right, they are relatives of, obviously, a fox, hence the bushy tail, and my god, she's quick. But we managed to put her down. Whew! By comparison to Kendo, she is very quick. So... but we still managed to get her. So we don't have too many guys that are left that we have to take on here. Who is left? So we have another special move we have to watch. There we go. So it's hold the kick button and then do a heavy kick. And now we have to fight ourselves. This should be interesting. So we've got the taunt, the high flash kick, and the flash kick. So in a lot of ways, Kung Fu Bunny is like Guile. Because Guile was all about doing the flash kicks. And it does seem like the strategy has to be you just need to get to a point where you can stun them and then get a clean shot in and you watch about a third of their life drop. But conversely, if they hit you and do the same thing, you're in a world of hurt. So now we have to fight Tai Cheetah again. We're going to fight him in the cavern. Ooh! So I think if I do that too many times, I make myself dizzy. But what I can also do is, as you just saw, I just stacked it. So if I can start pulling it off... and I can connect, I can literally chop him down. But I got too cocky and I relied on it too much and he put me right in my place. So we'll see if we can buy him in this final fight. And we did. So now who do we have? another... Okay, so we do the 3 buttons on the D-pad, and then standard punch, we do that massive spin. So now we have the Dalai Lama. So that's the double flash kick we learned. Aboard the boat. Oh, we got perfected. Perfect. Am I even going to be able to get a hit in on him at all? Well, I did. But I got knocked out. And we're at 26 minutes anyway, so, I mean, this is actually a perfectly good place to stop it. Well, we got a lot further than I anticipated in this game, if I'm flat out honest with you, because 1, I never played it before, and 2, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to grasp the mechanics of it well enough to be able to get anywhere. But that, everybody, in a nutshell, is Brutal Paws of Fury from 1994, for the Super Nintendo / the Sega Genesis. Now, question 1. Is this a good game? It's not a terrible game. I wouldn't say it's a game that will really stand out in your memory all that much. You know, for what... Think about it in terms of who created. GameTek was a company that really specialized in making, like, games based on classic TV game shows. I mean, they made stuff like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and The Price is Right and stuff like that. They made other games, but they also did stuff like pinball games, and they made games that were more specifically designed for kids. Not to say it's a bad thing, but they were more than happy to fill that niche. As far as I can tell, this is one of the only games that they did of the type that could fit into a fighting game. Now, they did do a sequel of this game called Brutal Unleashed Above the Claw, but that was only released for the Sega's 32X and MS-DOS computers in '95. So it wasn't received as well, and it wasn't as available as this game was. And then GameTek went out of business. They filed for bankruptcy in 1997, and most of the assets were taken over by Take-Two after it was liquidated. So for its time, again, it was a company trying to take advantage of the craze of fighting games. Like, there are companies out there right now still trying to mine every little nugget they can out of the first-person and battle royale genres. I mean, you see what's happening right now with all the blowback that Sony's getting about this game Conquered, which I have no intention of playing, no plans to play it, and all the early reviews have come back saying it's DOA. With a game like this, I think this is one that if you were a parent and you didn't want your kids playing Street Fighter 2 because you thought that was too violent, and you didn't want your kids playing Mortal Kombat because that was violent and gory, if the kids could figure out the blood codes at the time, then you looked at something like this and thought, okay, well, they can play this. It's furry animals practicing martial arts, beating each other up. I can handle this. It's no worse than watching a Looney Tunes cartoon, if I'm honest, except nobody's dropping anvils on their heads or sticking dynamite down their shorts. Not that I condone those things, but I'm a kid who grew up with those too, and I love them dearly. But is this a game they could make now? Yeah, I suppose they could. But why would you? You know, what's the benefit of making a game like this now at a time where you still have Mortal Kombat, you still have Street Fighter, you've got fighting games that are out there, you've got King of Fighters, you've got Soul Calibur still, but that time has predominantly passed. So novelties like this, it would indeed be a novelty. Would either Xbox or Sony pick it up? Probably not. I can see it on Steam, but I can't see it being a big seller either. This is the sort of game that is really passed people by. Or people have passed it by, I should say. It doesn't necessarily make it a bad game. I think it's just... Again, it was one of those points in the 90s where everybody thought they could put a fighting game out. in a lot of ways, everybody hoped that it would draw enough attention to it that it might recoup a little bit of the money that Capcom was raking in, as was Midway, for Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat. I have no idea how well this game sold. In doing all my research for it, I could not find any sales figures for how this game did. Again, 30 years ago, unit sales were big to the accountants and the bean counters, obviously, but it wasn't as predominantly public knowledge for most games, unless it was a truly monolithic title. I mean, think Street Fighter 2, think Mortal Kombat, think Zelda, think Mario Brothers, think Mario 64, games like that, think Grand Theft Auto. Ones that, because they were tentpole flagship titles, the impetus on having knowledge of how well they were selling was way more critical than to a game like this. Is it a game you should try? I guess. I mean, if you're looking for something different than your usual fare, sure. It's not super hard. Again, if you're going to try, if you want to up the difficulty, I would definitely go with the Genesis version over the Super Nintendo version. The Super Nintendo version is more accessible, but the Genesis version, as they stated in the reviews, will have slightly better graphics and better presentation to it. And you can play it on the 32X, you can play it on the Sega CD. So your options are a bit more varied if you've got an emulator or if you've got a Genesis still, and even if you have a Sega CD or a 32X unit that's attached to that. But good luck trying to find those cartridges or discs. But if you're going to try it on an emulator, I'm playing this on the SNES W emulator, which is a tried and tested SNES emulator, and I'm using Fusion 3.64 for all of my Genesis CD and 32X conversions as well, because obviously you play all of them. So, but let me know if you've played this game before. What was your experience with it? And that was a provocative look she just gave Kendo Coyote right there. But in the meantime, that is Sucker Punch Sunday for this week. Apologies for getting out a little bit later than usual. As I said on Monday during our one-day playthrough, we did have a bit of technical difficulty with our internet connection in our location going down. Xfinity was doing some maintenance over the weekend, and that kept me from not only being able to do recording, but being able to upload it. So that's why you're getting this on a Tuesday. But it is still a Sucker Punch Sunday at the end of the day. And we will have WTF Wednesday for you tomorrow, where we play a game that on paper seemed like a good idea, but in reality, not so much. This could have been a contender for it, but honestly, it's actually a better game in some ways than what it lets on. So I want to give it a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt on that. Also, keep an eye and an ear out for our next playthrough, which will be coming up starting in the early part of August. We're just getting the final dates for recording and whatnot narrowed down. As I have stated, now that we've completed Metal Gear Solid, we're going to take a break from that series. Now that we are 3 games into it. At some point, we will finish playing Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3. Because they are 2 of my favorite games of all time, especially Metal Gear Solid 3, but that will be further down the line. But our next game, the only thing I will tell you about it is one of my favorite franchises that was never brought onto US consoles. As far as I know, we never saw it on a US console, and I think that's a crying shame. And as we get into doing the recording and I get into the explanations for why I love the game that we are going to be doing the playthrough for, hopefully I will be able to articulate that to you. But in the meantime, I have done enough damage here for one day. My name is Ronan. It has been great to spend this Sucker Punch Sunday with you. Be safe, be well, happy gaming, and we will talk to you tomorrow for an episode of WTF Wednesday. Bye.